RE2, we're back, we're talking some FF7, we're talking some Remake Part 3, and we're having a bit of a discussion here on the channel, something I feel like we haven't done in a while. And it's kind of a two-parter. We're asking the question of, where's Remake Part 3 going to start? But also, will there be a demo? Just kind of go hand in hand. When it came to the first game, it's pretty obvious if there was going to be a demo, what it would be, the bombing mission, of course. And also, based on how Remake ended, it was pretty obvious how the next game would start, right? Especially when she got to, like, the episode intermission, like, post-credit scene or whatever. This shows our group walk into Calm, like we're kind of skipping that journey. That it kind of solidified that the second game was going to start at Calm. Technically, Rebirth starts with us controlling Zack in Sector 5, right? But that's more kind of like a prelude, essentially. The actual game itself, I feel like, starts with the Calm flashback and whatever. As for whether or not there's going to be a demo itself for the third game, that's kind of a given, because I think Square Enix does demos for pretty much all their games, but specifically for sure with, like, the Final Fantasy series. I think to the point that even, like, sequels in the series have had demos like 10 and 10-2 and like the 13 trilogy and shit like that. Even the original FF7 itself had like 4 different demos or some shit. 15 had multiple demos as well. So to me, it's pretty obvious that the third game will have a demo, but that kind of factors into where is the third game going to start, because most likely that will be the demo. Now, that's only assuming that there will be one demo. Rebirth had 2. Maybe the third game will have 2. Maybe the third game will have 3 goddamn demos. I don't know what they're going to do. Now, the most obvious starting point for the third game is Icicle Inn. Based on the original FF7, that's what takes place after the end of Disc 1, after the death of Aerith, which is how the second game concluded, right? To me, that seems the most likely just based on the order of events with the original FF7. Now, that might not matter with the Remake trilogy, but I would still put that up pretty high, if not like number 1 for where we'd probably start at. But I don't know what the demo itself would be. Again, hopping back to the first game, Remake, we knew that the demo would be the bombing mission, and we know what that is based on the original FF7. Obviously, very much expanded, but we know what takes place. Comes the second game, the demo is probably going to be the Calm flashback. We know what the Calm flashback is based on the original FF7, right? Icicle Inn is one of those locations in FF7 original that's kind of nothing, right? Other than the run with like Elena, it's grab snowboard, go down the mountain. Like, you don't have, there's not really a lot of story there. You can get lore there. There's like the Professor Gas like tapes and shit or whatever. But in terms of like actual narrative there, it's almost like a Nibelheim where you can just kind of go through it essentially. So if the game were to start Icicle Inn and also have the demo there, I don't know what it'd be other than us just kind of like walking around the town, I guess. And like maybe talking to characters. Obviously it's going to be expanded based on the original FF7's depiction of Icicle Inn. But like, I don't know what we're doing for, 45 minutes to an hour for a demo. I just don't really know what it'd be. It could be like a similar situation to Rebirth's demo where we're just kind of walking around exploring a cozy village, getting to interact with people, talk with people, and then just eventually along the way, through whatever narrative they're trying to give us, we do have like actual combat segments. And I suppose the narrative of this area would have to be something in regards to Professor Gast and Ifalna, Hojo, maybe even Aerith or whatever, because that's kind of the only lore that's here. And I guess it does make a bit of sense to start the third game with Aerith-related stuff, given that she obviously died at the end of the second game, or at least died. Now, while I do think Icicle Inn is probably the most likely, I don't think it's a guarantee based on the ending of Rebirth itself, because we actually fly in the opposite direction of the snowy area. With the ending segment, we see Cloud sit down next to this river, and off in like front of him and kind of off to the right is the snowy mountains, and we've been told by one of the devs, like a lead artist or something like that, that's an implication of the northern section, the Icicle Inn kind of area, right? But when we get to like the ending of this segment here, the Tiny Bronco flies in quite literally the opposite direction. So then it kind of comes down to, are we supposed to take what we see at the ending of the game very literal in terms of like, does the direction we're flying actually matter? I feel like we do. I feel like, all the details matter when it comes to these games. If that is the case, we are flying south, right? We're going away from the northern continent, essentially. And if we want to take it very literally, we do actually like curve to the right as we're flying away, which would actually be us flying in like the southwest kind of direction. If that is the case, that'd be towards like the Corel region and the Nibel region. So maybe it's possible we're headed towards Rocket Town. Which I do think can make a lot of sense considering that we didn't go to Rocket Town in Rebirth, and based on the order of events from the original FF7, we should have. We just kind of skipped it, kind of ignored it, right? And, Sid is the pilot. There's a good chance that maybe before we kick off the rest of the journey, maybe he wants to go back to his hometown for whatever reason. Maybe to finish repair on the Tiny Bronco for all we know. I don't know. And like, maybe we're not specifically going to Rocket Town, but we're definitely flying south. Maybe even southwest, right? And it'd be kind of weird if we didn't have an answer for where we're going. Because it'd be almost similar to like the episode intermission ending where our group's going to Calm with like the ending cutscene or whatever, and we see our group outside of Calm, and then if we start up Rebirth and we're in like fucking Junon or something, right? It's like, what? That's not where we were. That's not the direction we were going. We weren't headed there. We were going to Calm last we seen our group, right? We're literally flying south at the end of Rebirth. So if we just like pick up an Icicle Inn, it's like, fuck, where'd we go? Where'd we fly to? I just personally feel like there's got to be some sort of a payoff for us flying in that direction, because otherwise, why are we going that way? Why aren't we flying towards the snowy mountains in the distance, right? And I think the game picking up with us at like Rocket Town and kind of getting the backstory on the character of Sid, who we didn't learn a ton about when it came to Rebirth, makes a bit of sense, right? Given his backstory and what he's about and his connection to Shinra and all that other stuff. Also, I feel like somewhere along the way, probably towards the beginning of the game, we kind of got to lose the Tiny Bronco. Because when it came to the original FF7, right, we have the Tiny Bronco very, very briefly, and then it gets, like, destroyed, and then it becomes, like, a water vehicle, right? And we have that happen also in Rebirth, but once we get to the end of the game, Sid just fixes it, and we fly away. And it's like, we're going to have the Highwind at some point in the story, right? And why would we ever need the Highwind? It's obviously a better vehicle, but why would we ever need it if we have a flying vehicle already, right? So I feel like maybe something's going to happen to the Tiny Bronco again. Maybe it gets destroyed in Rocket Town, very similar to the original FF7, but this time, like, where you can't fly it anymore or something. And then we got to go after another flying vehicle, which would then be the Highwind. That's at least my guess. Really, I'm just talking about Rocket Town because it is, like, a new location somewhere we haven't been yet. It's related to Sid, of course. But really, we are just flying like the kind of southwest direction, so it could be kind of anything in that general direction that we're flying to, which would be kind of like the left side of the world map, essentially, when it came to Rebirth, which is Gongaga, Cosmic Canyon, Corel, or Nebel. And I think Cosmic Canyon's not a bad guess, just because maybe we could be going there to talk to Bugenhagen, who's obviously a very intelligent character, has a lot of knowledge. But you got to think with the new game, they'd want to start us in a new region, or a new area, right? Which, again, Rocket Town makes some sense for that. I actually hadn't even thought about it until now, but Rocket Town would be its own region. I just don't know what they'd call it, because even with the original FF7, it's by itself, right? You go through Nibelheim, you go through Mount Nebel, and then you get to the Rocket Town kind of area. It's just Rocket Town. They'd obviously changed that for the remake project, but I didn't thought about that until now, so it actually wouldn't be a bad starting point, because it'd be a completely brand new location, like a new town you're starting in, but also a whole brand new area to explore. And the same can certainly be said for Icicle Inn, of course, too. It's a brand new starting point, a brand new region to explore, all that other shit. All that also applies to Icicle Inn. I did ask this question on Twitter to kind of gauge people's like ideas on what they think is going to happen, how the game's going to start or whatever. And there's all kinds of different responses. There's people that, thought maybe there's going to be something brand new entirely that is not even related to the original FF7, as in like maybe Sephiroth related stuff involving Ever Crisis, or maybe like Zack era stuff, which is certainly possible. We could start with Zack again, maybe. And I actually had multiple people mention the Junon escape being the starting point potentially, and that does make a bit of sense because that's not super far into the second disc, not far after Aerith's death or whatever, right? But I will say though, if we do start there, we're skipping a lot of content that then has to be told through flashbacks, and I don't know if they're going to go that route. It'd be kind of a weird kind of story pacing, I guess, when it comes to the third game, because if we just presume that everything's going to play out like the original FF7, right? Let's just say we start at the Icicle Inn. That'd be like its own chapter, and then Great Glacier would be its own chapter, Guy's Cliff its own chapter, Whirlwind Maze / North Crater would be like 1 or 2 chapters, and then we're at the Junon escape, right? And that'd be something like, 4 hours of content of like flashbacks or something, unless they crammed it all into like a cutscene or like a really fast-paced chapter or something like that. I don't know, it'd be kind of weird. Plus, it would be kind of a spoiler that we're going to get caught at some point if we start at the escape and then we jump back in time. Starting the Junon escape did make sense back whenever people theorized that the second game would be ending at the North Crater, but that obviously did not happen, right? Because that's clearly where we pick up the next game. Something they'd start the next game like that, because it'd be comparable to us starting Rebirth on Chapter 5, which is the cargo ship, and then us just like flashing back to what happened in the first 4 chapters. It'd be kind of strange for pacing, in my opinion. Like, if we're going to do that, then why not just do the shit in chronological order and just get to the capture scene organically, right? For me personally, I do think that Rocket Town or Icicle Inn are the most obvious ones, and Icicle Inn's probably in the lead just a little bit just because that makes the most sense. But based on the end of the game and the direction we fly away, I think Rocket Town's a pretty decent guess. And they're both decent starting points, brand new areas, brand new regions to explore. Kind of slow-paced areas, too, for the most part. I think maybe story-wise, Icicle Inn's the better starting point just because it's kind of following up on the ending more directly, but also giving us like backstory on Gas and Yufalna and Aerith and Hojo and all that other shit, right? Also, starting in Rocket Town does give us the backstory on the character of Sid, who is an important party member, and that also does kind of link to potentially Yufalna and Aerith and shit. First, before I pass off to you guys, what are your thoughts on the starting point for Remake Part 3? Is it going to be something like the Icicle Inn, which is the most obvious, maybe something else like Rocket Town, maybe somewhere else entirely, something brand new? Do we jump forward in time a bit and then go through flashback segments? What do you think? And when thinking about where the game's going to begin at, what makes the most sense for a demo? Because that's obviously where the demo's going to be, if we have only one demo. Possible we could have more than one demo, similar to Rebirth having the Junon demo, which does jump ahead a couple chapters, right? But it is mostly gameplay. There's probably some dialogue or exposition, but we can't even explore the whole region. We can't go to Under Junon. You can mostly just explore that kind of tiny region, right? Something to keep in mind, too, when we talk about at least one demo when it comes to the third game, is that with like the remake demo and the first demo for Rebirth, they're very small and limited, where you're just controlling like 1 or 2 characters, right? With remakes, it was just Cloud, and then eventually you get to like learn Barrett's combat, right? And then with Rebirth, it's just Cloud, and then you get to learn Sephiroth's combat, right? And it's probably gonna be a similar thing, some sort of slow-paced start, whether that's Icicle Inn, Rocket Town, or something else entirely. We're probably just gonna be controlling like one character, and then maybe learn the combat of another character. And then they could do a second demo, like the Junon demo, where you control like the whole party, and kind of practice combat with everybody. Either way, that'll be the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so snorks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, dashingdavidbusiness. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought. but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Low Gain, or leave it like Cobain.